Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. Sorry I'm a speck late if you're live here because I hit the wrong button and I kept asking, are you hearing me? And nobody was saying they did. So it's a good thing I noticed that and I started over again because the button didn't click properly. But I am live now, I hope. Tell me if you can see and hear me so I don't go through. Oh, thank God. I was like, why doesn't anybody want to respond? Because I wasn't even live yet. Okay, so today, now I have this behind me. I'm going to be talking about the Barry and Honey Sherman case. And the only reason this is behind me is because I was already there, saying, hey, can you help the channel out? So, and can you help the channel out? So anyway, if you want to help the channel out, this is a super chat show. So you can just send along a little help during the show. If you'd like to donate on a regular basis, there is Patreon. And at the third level, you can come to my Hangouts. You can always buy one of my books that's listed below, or just subscribe if you're broke. And I love you anyway, because if you subscribe, it helps the algorithm. And I like to see you and be able to communicate with you. You can also share with your friends that do have money. And you can hit the button for notifications and like the video. That helps too. So that's my spiel. All right. Oh my God. So many people here because this is a really, really exciting case. And there already have been some viewpoints on it. And first of all, to start out, I want to thank Benny because he's already sent me a super sticker even before the show. And I appreciate that terribly much. Thank you. All right. And I want to point out that there's various views. Let me put up my proper background again, because as I said, I kind of was in the wrong place when I hit the button. Oh my God. I continue to have problems with these things. All right, here we are. So this is Barry. This is Honey Sherman. And they were murdered in 2017 in a suburb of Toronto, I believe. Am I going to get that wrong? Wait, let me look. Let me be sure it's Toronto. Where were they? I think they're a suburb of Toronto. They were in... Okay. They're in North York, and if you're in Canada, you know where that is. If you're one of people like me in the U.S., you haven't a clue, because we don't know as much about our neighbors to the north as we should. But at any rate, the crime went down in 2017, so it's just over 4 years old now. And some people have different viewpoints of what might have happened to them, and that's why it's such a bizarre case. Some people think it was a murder-suicide, which is what the police started out thinking it was. Then some people think it's a hit. And then some people think it's more of a personal thing. Kim thinks it's a hit. She says, I also know it's a professional hitman. And Benny says, Kerry Winter, there I said it. Kerry Winter is a relative. So I'm going to start by just giving you the basics of what the crime was. And then I'm going to start where the police started saying it was a murder-suicide and tell you if I think that has validity, and I'll move on to the other different issues. And I do have I think you're going to find a very interesting and different analysis from most people on this case. I've done some crime scene reenactments in my home, and it has led me to some really interesting conclusions. So hang in here. All right, so here we go. Let's start with what happened to the Shermans. So some people really do not know this case, and I actually, quite frankly, didn't know this case either. So that's their home. Okay, so what happened was this was the Shermans' home, and they were planning to sell this home. Oh, by the way, in case you don't understand, they're billionaires, and I mean massive billionaires. Not like we just barely made $1 billion. It's like we got billions. These were extraordinarily wealthy people. Okay, very wealthy. And this house was phenomenally huge, but apparently not good enough. So Honey wanted a bigger house. I mean, what was it going to be? It was going to be 16,000 square feet. It was going to have a central swimming pool with a 41-foot retractable skylight. Living quarters for the staff. They're going to be, oh, good Lord, a car stacker in the garage. I don't even know what that even means. Anyway, this was a huge house. It had an outside pool, tennis courts, and an inside lap pool down in the basement. The place is stunning. But Honey kind of like the fancy stuff. And so she wanted a bigger house. And, you know, quite frankly, for them, it would be like me getting an apartment for $300. For them, they could buy a massive property and build this huge home. And they were 75 and 70. So I think Barry didn't really give a crap, quite frankly. He was kind of one of these billionaires that wasn't into buying stuff. He's one of those guys that goes with the old car and the plain old stuff. And he just like, his interest was in his business and the game of his business. That's what gave him a thrill. He didn't care about buying stuff. So his wife, on the other hand, did like pretty things. And so he was like, I don't even know why we need to move from this huge house and have to deal with another one. I'm 75, you're 70, really. But it was closer to their children and their grandchildren. They had a bunch of them. So he was okay with it. He was going to go with it. And so they were getting plans together for that. So what happened was on the day that they were last seen was on, let's see, it was on the 13th of December in 2017. And Honey had gone to work where Barry works at Apotex. That's his company. And they had the architects over and they were all looking at all the stuff, right? I think she left about, I got this straight, 6:30 p.m. She drove away. And there's proof she drove away and went home. And then a couple hours later, he drove away and went home. And there's video of that too, him leaving the premises. Then they did not appear the next day. And people like, they called them. They didn't know what happened to him. Anyway, but nobody was like, well, something terrible happened. They were like, well, maybe they just, they're busy or something. But on December 15th, Barry and Honey were not supposed to be home. So what happened was the cleaning staff came and the real estate lady came with some people, actually. And this is kind of horrifying. So anyway, the cleaning staff came. They started cleaning this huge house. And it's a massive house. So they came in, nothing looked amiss. Except, I think Barry's car was out front and Honey's was on the side, but they just came in and the place was empty-ish and they were cleaning away. And then the real estate person came in with a couple people and she was showing them this beautiful, gorgeous house. And I shouldn't laugh, but then she goes downstairs into the basement to this beautiful pool area, which is like a lap pool in the basement. And she walks in and she's like, because there's two dead people in there, she's trying to get the clients out, and they're like really upset. Like, why won't you let us look? And they thought this is bad juju. They're from China, so I don't know if they say juju, but anyway, she's like getting them away. They don't want the house. Maybe nobody wanted the house after this. So, but what happened was right here, what you're seeing here, this part of you see those bars? That is what they found Barry and Honey attached to. They were sitting there by these under these bars, looking away from the pool, and they had belts around their necks that were tied to these bars. I don't know whether it was this bar or this bar, but one of those bars. And so that was how they were found. So very weird. So at that point, of course, the word went out that something had happened to them. And the police came in, and what they determined originally was that this was a murder-suicide, that Barry had killed Honey, strangled her, and because there was a little bit of damage to her face, and I'm going to say that the information on that is sketchy. I hear that there was a bruise, but then there was supposedly not a bruise because she didn't bruise because the damage happened right before she died or even after. And then I read there were cuts like a cut on her lip and something here on her face. I can't get hold of those original reports, so I don't know who's telling the truth. So she had some damage on her face. He did not have any damage on him at all. So the theory was that he, got depressed with life and decided that's it. And maybe he got mad at his wife. Some people said he wanted to divorce her. Some people said they were the happiest couple ever. Depends what gossip you listen to. And so supposedly he strangled her. And then after he killed her and hung her up or whatever he did, then he took a belt and put it around his own head and killed himself. Okay, so that was the original theory. Some people weren't too happy with that theory, and there's some reasons why they weren't too happy with it. I'm going to, before I go on, I just want to show you where I got some of my information from. So here we have, I did read the Billionaire Murders. That's basically the only decent book on the case, and it had a lot of great information about the whole history of the Shermans. So, because I wondered what's up with these people. When you're looking at a murder suicide, you got to see some motive for the murder to happen and the suicide to happen. What kind of guy was Barry Sherman? Was he the kind of guy? He was 75. Sometimes people do kill themselves and do take out their mates because maybe their business is failing, maybe their health is failing, maybe there's some reasons. And so you want to look at all of their background to see what kind of guy is he? What kind of brain does he have? How has he behaved in the past? Is this something he would even do? So I read this book and it had tremendous information on that. So I do recommend that book highly. It's a really good book, and you can get it at Amazon. And I will put the link below because I forgot to do it. Anyway, also, you can also watch The Fifth Estate. That's on Amazon. The link is definitely below. Very, very fascinating. That video is pretty good. Gives a lot of good information. And also, there's a recent police press conference from the Ontario Police with this detective. And so I got some information from that. So this is where I got my information. I just want to let you all know that before we start, because it's always let me go here. Oh my goodness. I'm just while I'm doing this, I got to say, thank you, Carolina. That is so sweet. Carolina says, so glad you're analyzing this case. I can't figure out if it's a professional hit or a crazy person. And that is the dilemma. Okay. But I'm going to talk about the suicide first, but thank you very much for your support. So many things are coming in here now. I'm going to try to keep up with you all. So if I stop for a second just to look, okay, I'm going to go ahead now and talk about. I want to just talk about him, Barry. Let me go back and let me pull up Barry, because this guy was something else. Let me tell you. I'm not going to give you his whole story because you're going to be able to get that story from in a book or on a video. And, I'm not real good with 5,000 details of people's lives, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on Barry and Honey. All right. Barry and Honey have been married for a really long time and they had a bunch of kids. Okay. And they had a bunch of grandkids. Barry is an interesting character. Most people said they really liked him. Some people said, well, maybe it was just one who said they didn't, that he had this attitude that was unacceptable. Barry is brilliant. There's no way around that. The dude is so brilliant. He almost went to work for NASA, and he could have worked for NASA, but then he decided he didn't like to have somebody else be boss. So he ended up working for himself. And what happened was he lost his parents young, and also his cousins. This is going to come out later. His aunt and uncle had this company, and he ended up buying the company when he was a pretty young man and getting in it with a best friend of his. And they ran this company. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but whatever he did worked because the guy became a billionaire. Okay. It was a drug company using generic. It was a generic drug company, but he had a million side things too that he did. He just loved, the dude's a chess player. That's what he is. That's what he loved. He had business as a chess game, and maybe a 3-level chess game because he's that smart. So he's always moving things around. So that was his thrill in life, was the game. And he did win at it more than he lost. He also sued the crap out of a lot of people. So that is important when you think who would want to do him in. And the interesting thing is he sued people. He usually won, but then sometimes he lost, but then he shrugged his shoulders and said, well, whatever. And he kept going. So again, it was a game to him. He wasn't overly bent out of shape about losing. He was not religious. He was an atheist. He just wanted to live his life well that he was here. So also, the very important thing about these two, they were huge philanthropists. They were unbelievable philanthropists. He thought everybody should give 20% of their salary, especially if they have money, And if they didn't, he thought they were schmucks. Okay. And so, he did live up to that. I mean, the amount of money they gave away was phenomenal. I can't fault two people who do what they did. They were probably the biggest philanthropists at the time, and just amazing. And he looked for things to support. So they weren't cheapskates. They really weren't. Then there was the issue of a lot of some of his relatives, and we'll get into this. His cousins. He's got 4 cousins. He bought the company that the uncle had, and there was some kind of legal issues about how much the cousins would get from that company. If it survived, like 20% or something. And there was a whole bunch of legal issues in that. At any rate, some of that didn't pan out for the cousins the way they wanted. But meanwhile, this guy he bankrolled all these 4 cousins eventually. He gave them money, he gave them businesses, he hired them. I mean, maybe you didn't like being, quote, manipulated like some thought, but man, the guy was generous. And I wish I had an uncle like that, who would bankroll me to the extent that he bankrolled people. So he really, and she also, she spent a lot of time in philanthropy as well. They were a really well-liked couple. They really were, regardless of his personality, which was a bit unusual. He's a brilliant guy. He spent all his time working. He wasn't into socializing like his wife. He didn't really care about traveling. He just wanted to go to work every day and stay there until he felt ready to go to sleep. So, but their marriage survived, and the kids grew up well. So when it came down to the murder-suicide issue, the question is, would he have committed suicide? Did he have a motive to commit suicide, especially to kill his wife and then kill himself? And I could not find any motive. I really could not find it. He was doing well enough in life, even though he had, lawsuits and stuff going on, and maybe all kinds of issues, legal issues and whatever going on. He was used to that. That was his thing. And he's 75. He's never going to prison. And there was nothing out there that was going to make him, I'd say, horrifically embarrassed that he's going to ruin his life. None of that was there. He seemed to still have a good relationship with his wife. They were planning on moving. He was moving forward with that. He wanted to be near his grandkids. I see nothing in him for murder-suicide, because it usually comes down to financial disaster, or he's got a girlfriend on the side. I don't see it. I don't see it anywhere. And he's so generous with his money. If they actually divorced, somebody said, oh, well, he didn't want her to have half the money. I don't think he would have cared, because he was so good at giving money away. I just don't see it. Now, that's just an opinion I get from his background. I don't see a motive for him. But let's go look at the crime scene, because, you can have all the personal opinions you want, but the question is, does the crime scene show you it's a murder-suicide, or does the crime scene show you something else? All right, now let's go to the theoretical crime scene. Well, it's not the theoretical crime scene. We can't show you, yes, this is true. I just want to put this up. Serene says, I believe he took over his uncle's business when his uncle died at a young age. Yeah, his family kept kicking off, They died a lot. And he thought he wasn't going to live very long because everybody died. In spite of the fact he did not exercise. He ate crap. He knew he did, and he didn't care. He said, well, whatever. The dude made it to 75, and he had to be killed off or kill himself off before he left this earth, because it's just interesting. This is a good comment, Humanimal says. Why give in death if you give so much in life? I mean, he was so busy. He was busy. And I don't see any reason he wanted an exit at that particular time. Now, okay, the money goes to one of his 4 kids. One was cut off recently, always losing money. Yeah, he had a lot of relatives that were losing money off of the money he gave them. But I'm talking about, let's stay with murder-suicide for now. Humanimal says, only if he had a serious illness, which he didn't. He was perfectly fine. Or was going to be exposed, which there's no evidence of. It's weird for that kind of thing. Absolutely. Okay, so let's look at the actual issue of whether it could be suicide or not. Let's go back to the swimming pool. because that's where it happened. All right. I'm going to get into how they got, I'll get into a lot of stuff later, but let's look at the swimming pool. Okay. I'm going to take a drink here. Right. Now, they were found, it was death by ligature. It was a ligature around the neck. The theory being that because Honey had a little bit of damage somewhere, which is questionable, but it's there. It's just I don't know exactly what it was because they keep changing their minds on that in the reports. Not from the police, but, from the media. And Barry was not injured in any way. You think, how is that possible? Because usually if you do see one person injured and another person isn't, it may be because the person who isn't injured the person that is, right? So in theory, this is the theory, that he went to strangle her. There was some little bit of altercation. He strangled her. Then he hung her up on, I'm just going to point to this one because it's available. He hung her up on this, made her, just put her body sitting down, and then tied the belt, and the belts. There's also not good information about this, but apparently Honey bought a couple belts for Barry, sheep belts, and those were the belts around their neck. There were cheap belts around their neck, but it wasn't proven that they were her belts that she bought him. So it's a little confusing. One was supposedly on him. One was supposedly in the closet. And there's not good information on that, so I can't go there. But it's interesting because those would be things from within the house. Usually when people come and commit a crime, they don't use paraphernalia from inside the house unless they kind of suck at what they do. So that was one reason the police said, hey, this is an internal house thing. This is a murder-suicide because Barry apparently went and got a couple belts from his closet or took it off his, what he was wearing. And he used one, maybe he used one to kill her. And then he hung her up on this little thing here, tied her up, and she was just sitting there, slumped. Okay. Then maybe he said, okay, I've killed her. I'm going to go down for this. So he goes upstairs and gets another belt, comes down, and he sits down. And one of the reasons they thought it was a suicide because his feet were crossed like this and his glasses were properly perched. In other words, not looking like a fight. And then he had hung himself supposedly and died. Okay. So far, it's not a bad theory. So I'm not going to fault the police right off. Some people say, well, he couldn't have killed himself by putting a belt around his neck there, and then he's just sitting there. It wasn't enough of a drop for him to die. That is not true. But just in case you want to do yourself in sometime in the future, and you're in your bed at the assisted living place or in the nursing home, people in nursing homes have been known to take the rope tie it around their neck, tie it to like a bar on the bed, and just lean over the side of the bed. And what happens is this gets constricted here and the blood doesn't flow back to your brain. And eventually, maybe not real, takes maybe a minute or two, you kind of get a little happy and then you go, oh. And when that happens, what the problem is, you cannot pick your head back up. And therefore, you die because the blood does not return. And a lot of times people are found like hanging in their closets like that on their knees. And people go, well, why don't they just stand up? Well, they can't stand up because they're unconscious or dead. And so that's what happens. You become unconscious first. And once you become unconscious, you can no longer move your body back into a position that will save your butt. So I don't have a problem with this concept so far. It could be that for whatever reasons, they had an argument and he strangled her. And then he's like, oh, crap, I've done her in. Now, I can't have my kids think that, whatever. So I'm going to kill myself too. Not unreasonable until you get to this problem. Apparently, both of their wrists had these markings as if they'd been tied behind their back. Now, the restraints had been removed, so it was just the markings. But clearly, if there's markings on the wrists of both of the victims, it kind of throws the murder-suicide thing out the window. Really does. And there's another thing that just made no sense to me, and it's about the coats. They were wearing coats. I got a coat here. Okay, I'm going to put it on. I'm going to show you later what the real import of this is. Okay, so I got this coat. And supposedly the claimant, okay, so they got, hold on a second, I'm going to make this work. Okay, so here's my winter coat because it was December and it was snowy outside. I don't know what they were wearing. It was said that Barry was wearing a full winter coat and Honey was wearing more of an autumn style coat. Don't know what that actually means. But anyway, so here's a coat. Now, supposedly they're both found with the coat pulled down like this. And I'm thinking to myself, what purpose would that serve in a murder-suicide? If you strangled your wife, why would this thing be down? If you killed yourself off, why would this coat be down like this? It makes no sense. So there is a theory on that, which I disagree with, and I'm going to tell you that a little bit later because I have a very good idea of exactly why the coat were pulled down. That is not what I've heard before. Okay, so anyway, I'll get to that later. But because of the wrist being put behind the back and tied, there's evidence of that, and the ties were removed, whatever it was. They obviously can't remove them after they're dead, right? So, and then the coat being pulled down made no sense either. So those were the two things for me that made no sense in just a crime scene analysis as to this was a murder-suicide. Third would be, I didn't see his motive. I didn't see Barry's motive at all, unless he just lost his brain and got angry with his wife and accidentally choked her to death. That does happen. It does. I find it unlikely in this situation, but it does. You can't spend that much more money on this damn house. I mean, could it happen? Maybe, but it's very unlikely. So now so that one to me is unlikely. All right. And as Nicole says, that sounds so strange. Well, this whole crime is strange, just to be fair. The entire crime is strange. Let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next issue on this. Now, Lisa says, under regular circumstances, yes, I would need to know more about them as people and as a married couple. Most couples share finances. Some don't. I get that. Just because you asked that, I don't know what Steve said because I can't find it. But apparently she was a little annoyed with Barry because he controlled the majority of the money and he gave her a lot of money to do what she wanted with, but she was annoyed that she didn't have total control. She got an allowance. I mean, it's an allowance that would probably in 1 week would be worth my entire life. I'm okay with that allowance. But, once you're really, really rich, maybe that allowance annoys you that you have to say, hey, can I have more money? So, yes, there was some issues on that. But this is true. What I just missed it. Okay. I'm going to point some of this out. I did a quick search on the crime and it sounded like the victims were posed, so whoever found them would be shocked. Well, yes, that could be, and no, that may not be. So one of the issues with when we try to determine such things, and I want to point this out too. So Red Rum is saying maybe the coat thing was some kind of weird signature by the killers. I'm not being serious, sorry. But I have an issue with a lot of concepts of signature. So thank you, Red Rum. Sometimes when it's serial killers, they supposedly do weird things that are considered signatures. Sometimes they could be something they wanted people to see that say, ha, like I'm an artist, look what I've done. Sometimes it's just actually part of the MO or modus operandi. That's just something they needed to do. And in this case, I'm going to tell you it's MO. It was not signature. It was modus operandi. That's my viewpoint. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. So let's continue on. Okay. So I do not see this as a murder-suicide. And it's kind of funny because I didn't know anything about this crime. And when I first heard about it, I sort of did think to myself, I'm just going to probably end up saying this is a murder-suicide. And, because normally double homicides don't include two people being hung by belts at the pool. I mean, that's so bizarre in itself. That's not normal. So I began to think, yeah, I'm probably going to go that direction, but I'm going to investigate everything, analyze everything, and see where I fall. Not a murder-suicide. Absolutely not. So let's go on to the next theory about a hit. Okay? Because we're talking about a dude with a lot of money. I mean, let's face it, the guy is really rich. Okay, so he had a company called Apotex. And this company, I mean, they're a generic company. So the big pharma people aren't too happy with the generic people. They don't like them too much. And, things are, so much. It's such a big enterprise. So much money, so many secrets. There's problems with espionage, people stealing your secrets and selling them. There's problems with other countries, what you're dealing with. It can be a very, very, it's playing on a level that the majority of us haven't a clue about because we're not there. And it's very hard to analyze for me, what happens at the massive corporate level and international level when I'm like this, I'm like, I know how to take Excedrin when I have a headache. That's my level. Okay, so admitting ignorance in that sense, I did look at the fact, okay, is this a hit by somebody who was really ticked at him for some kind of corporate issues, that they wanted him out of the way because he was costing them a whole bunch of money. Could that be it? And so I'm looking at this crime and I'm going, first of all, generally speaking, most companies do not actually assassinate you because it's an economic issue. That's not usually the way it goes. Things are taken up in court, just like Barry himself. Barry fought a lot of people over a lot of issues. He took them to court and he played his game and he fought them and he enjoyed that whole thing because you're talking about businessmen who a lot of times, they have so much money and they play the game against each other. And even if they like, I'm going to get you, they're like, yeah, but you're trying to get me. And so it's more of a competition than it is somebody you need to eliminate entirely. So I looked over the different issues going on in his life, and I could not come up with anything that was outstanding for why somebody would want to eliminate him. Okay. And eliminate him and his wife as well. So then I go back to the scene. Okay. So this is really important. Let's go back to the scene. How do people eliminate somebody that they want to do? And let me tell you, this isn't it. Like, you send in a professional hitman, you're gunned down someplace. You and your wife leave some location and the guy just guns you down. If you don't need to kill the wife, you just gun down Barry, because neither one of them took very many precautions. They didn't have personal security. Even their house sucked for security. He just basically said, if somebody's going to get you, they're going to get you. And he was right about that. That's true. But the concept of a hitman, the way this crime went down, is just doesn't represent the way you would just off somebody. You could do something else. You want to be sneaky, you could like do something about their make it look like a car crash, that do something to their brakes or something. All kinds of things you could do, but to actually go into the home and then control these people, strangle them, hang them up here. Why would a hitman go through all this when you can just shoot them down? I mean, shoot them down, toss the gun. It's a legal gun. You bought it. It's not on. You didn't buy it legally, so there's no way to track you. You shoot them. You're a hitman. You shoot them. You toss it out. You're done. You're not going to play this little game of setting up this scenario here. What in the heck would be the point of that? It doesn't make sense. It makes less sense than the murder suicide. The there's no reason, there's no message they're going to give because it's a confusing crime. If it ends up looking like suicide, murder, suicide, you've kind of blown your message because now you're just saying Barry's an emotional mess and wiped out his wife. I mean, and even if it looked like a hit, if you hire good hit people, they're not going to come back to the international company you're representing. The police aren't going to, they're probably not going to find you. So it makes no sense. This is the way hit people act. It just isn't. So I'm like, no, they're not going to stage a murder suicide for no reason. I mean, it doesn't benefit them, and it's a waste of time and energy. So I just don't see any evidence that that is true. So I personally, I know that who was big on the hitman thing. It was Kim. Sorry, Kim. I can't come down with the hitman thing on that at all. It's just not the way they behave. Crime scene doesn't indicate that. So I'm moving that away. Nicole says, don't super wealthy people have top-notch security? Why is that coming up? Oh, maybe it is. Okay. They can. Barry just didn't want it. He didn't care. He's basically, as he pointed out, if they're going to get you, they're going to get you. He just wanted to live his life, do what he wanted to do. And apparently he made it to 75 without being killed. So, he didn't do much with cameras around the house. No, he didn't do much in security. He didn't. That's just the way he was. All right. So let me see what other comments you have. Mr. Oakham wouldn't be amused. I'm not sure. I think Mr. Oakham would be amused. I think he might agree with me, but we'll see. Okay. Okay. Now we have a comment here. I'm sure they've seen as modern art. No offense to the artist, but the victims being posed like that is eerie. Now, what is Lisa talking about? Now, I will show you what Lisa is talking about. All right. Let's go to nearby. Remember nearby the pool, right? Nearby the pool, there is this. Yeah, that's creepy. There is this modern thing, and these people sitting pretty much like Barry and Honey were sitting next to the pool. Yes, that is bizarre. Now, hitman isn't going to waste his time with that bull. And if you killed your wife and you're just trying to make it look like, I don't know what he would be trying to make it look like. If Barry killed his wife and himself, I don't think he's going to stage himself looking like his art. I mean, I don't think so. Here's another thing. Let me point out. If Barry is very financially astute, let's face it, the guy's brilliant in finances. Although if he'd done his wife in, the last thing he really wants to do is make it look like a murder suicide, because then they can't collect the insurance. Now, admittedly, they're rich as crap, so the insurance may not be meaningful. But to Barry, who always likes a good game, I don't think he'd like to give that money up. I think he'd stage that as a murder, not as a murder-suicide. He'd try to make it look like they were both murdered, so the kids could still collect on the insurance. But this thing, weird, yes. And I do think this may play a part. So how would that be true? Okay, now, if you take away the possibility that this is a hit, and you take away the possibility that there is that this was a murder-suicide, you're left with a personal grievance. Okay, now I want to show you a picture of this. Now, just recently, the police came out, and the detective came through, and let me get his name straight again. I want to make sure I get his name right, because if anybody knows how recently I was talking about the Delphi case and how Carter, that was the superintendent, he did an interview, and it was the worst police interview I've ever heard. And he gave one previously, a press conference, and again, it was terrible. He got very emotional. He said he was, try to play mind games with a killer, making him feel guilty, which he doesn't, making him feel scared, which he isn't, because you aren't doing a very good job catching anybody. And then he came off and said, it's going to be 3 years or less before we catch you. And I'm like, you just told that dude it's going to be 3 years? That means you don't You don't have anything going for you. You just admitted to the public and the killer that you really aren't doing very well in the investigation. A horrible, horrible, horrible interview. Now, this guy, the police investigator, came out. Let me see what I just want to get his name right. I put it down here someplace, and now I'm going to be annoyed if I don't have it. Where did it go? I put so many notes here that I can't find it. Oh, where is he? Hold on one second. Please be patient. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, I found it. The police detective is it's a homicide squad detective. It was Detective Sergeant Brandon Price. Okay. I showed you, this is the guy over here. I have the link below of the actual police press conference. This guy did the great press conference. This is what you're supposed to do. He's very almost monotone. He's not emotional. He's not even necessarily likable. That's what you're supposed to do. Almost robotic. Again, what you're supposed to do. He's giving information to the public that that the police department wants the public to know. And so he very carefully crafted, it was a very carefully planned speech about exactly what he wanted the public to know. It included probably some, made the police look better than maybe some of the things they've been doing haven't been as successful as they wish, and they're not going to talk about that. So he got past that. He also did answer questions, which was quite brave, but he answered them very, very technically and very intelligently. This is my exact example of a properly done police press conference. Thumbs up to him. So the main reason they did this was because they had a video of the person they believe killed the Shermans. And the reason they believe this is because this guy he was someplace else, and he walked toward the Shermans' home. And then the Shermans' home has no cameras around it. So he goes out of sight where the Sherman home is. He stays out of sight for a reasonably long period of time, and they won't say when this video was taken, and when the second video was taken that he was coming back. They won't give us the information on that. They won't say how long he was missing. But in other words, this is a guy that walks onto the Sherman property and likely into the house, stays there for a long enough time, because remember, Honey came home first and Barry came home later. So it is very likely the person killed Honey first, then killed Barry, or tied up Honey first and waited for Barry to come home, and they were both downstairs by the pool. Now, I'll explain that in a minute. But anyway, this guy goes there, and then time later, the guy comes back and he goes away. They want to know who people think this guy is. And his shape is, they say, they can't say if he's a man or a woman, but we're all going to say this is a dude. His height is between about 5'6" and 5'9". That's their claim. And then he has a weird walk because his right foot kind of moves like kicks the snow as he moves. And I don't know if that's means it's his normal gait, or that just is because he's walking through a bunch of snow or whatever. I don't know. But they're focusing on that. They're asking anyone who knows this, who can recognize this guy's basic shape and height and his kicking of the snow, and let them know who it is. That's what they're saying. Now the questions from the media were, well, why didn't you have this early on, like 4 years ago? And the answer was, yes, we did. But we prefer to work behind the scenes trying to determine who this guy was. And since 4 years has passed and they can't prove something, they're now going to bring this out. Now, I'm not going to say whether I approve of the fact they kept this quiet for 4 years. But here's my point. If this were a hitman, who do you think is going to rat this dude out? First of all, a hitman is usually sent in from another area. Nobody's going to know him. And even if nobody's going to rat him out. I mean, it's not a hitman. That's the whole point. It's not a hitman. It is one guy going to the Sherman home, doing something to the Shermans and leaving. It's not a hit guy. They have an idea that somebody in the local area knows who he is, whether he is a I mean, there was no robbery there. I mean, burglary. There was no burglary. No, nothing was stolen. The house wasn't just messed up. It was a targeted hit. I say hit. A targeted murder of the Shermans. So we have one guy, not two guys either, which is very interesting. And I'm going to go over that in a minute. We have only one guy going to the Sherman's house, clearly doing them in and leaving. So they want to know who this guy is, and they believe somebody locally can identify him. So this is why it's a personal crime and not a hit. They have the guy, that there's a guy. It's not a murder-suicide. They're admitting that. And it's not a hit because there's no way they're focusing on this guy if it were a hit. So it is a personal crime. Now the question comes in, who had a grievance with the Shermans? And so if you go back and you watch any of the Fifth Estate, if you had a weapon, he would have used it. Using a weapon doesn't mean you if you have say a gun, having a gun doesn't mean you shoot people. Having a gun means you can control people. If you have a knife, it doesn't mean you have to knife them. It can mean you're controlling them. Okay, so having a weapon is useful, but it doesn't mean you're going to use a weapon as the final way of killing them. So we want to keep that marriage. That's an interesting point. Wait a minute. If he was carrying a weapon, no, I just read that. Okay. He could be limping because carrying a weapon, or another example of not giving public the chance to say, the car thing, the car is not nearby. They did not let us know whether there was a car that he eventually got into. But now ask yourself this question. Why is the car parked so far away from the Sherman's house? If you're like a hitman, you can just cover up your license plate and pull up and go in and kill them and leave. But if your car is recognizable, even if you can't see the license plate, and people are going to say, hey, that's his car, you don't want your car near that site. So you would want your car someplace else. So that is important to realize. He could have a weapon with him. That is true. Let's say you were carrying a weapon in a way that interfered a little bit with the way he walked. So if he's right-handed, for example, he could have a weapon in the right, in a right holster. I don't know. We can't tell. One of the questions about this is that it's a very, very blurry, far away image. It's not very clear, so you can't tell too much. So they're going with what they have at this point. All right. So now, and who would just walk by, because so many people have cameras on their homes these days, and would you have a video? Well, the person who walked by most likely knew the Shermans didn't have a video, because that's the important one. Walking by, as with your the coat on and your head covered, doesn't tell people who you are. I mean, obviously they don't know who this guy is, or they think they know who it is, but they want more confirmation. But a figure like that covered up is hard to identify. So some way they're going to get into the house. Somebody did. So somebody did go down the street by the videos. Mind you, a lot of times we say, oh, somebody wouldn't do that. And yet somebody did do that. So it's proven already they did that. And why did they do that? Probably because they're not a professional hitman. It's somebody who wanted to do what he wanted to do, which makes it, again, personal. Okay, so let's go back to, I want to go back to the scene now, because I think this is really where it all comes down. I'm going to, let me talk about, before I do that, let me talk about a possible suspect, because he did come up and put himself in the limelight. He did the thing on the fifth, what's the name of that? The fifth, oh no, I've forgotten the name of it. Dang, it was on the show. What was the name of the darn show? Did I put that up here before? Okay, wait a minute. The Fifth Estate. Couldn't remember what the heck the next word was. The Fifth Estate. He was willing to be interviewed on the Fifth Estate, Kerry Winter. Now, who is Kerry Winter? And why would he be a good suspect? Now, let me stop here and say, I'm not saying he's guilty of this crime. I'm just saying I believe it's a personal crime, and we're going to have to look close to the family. The police are going to look close to the family, close to friends, to find out who had a real grudge against the family, because it not only Barry but also Honey. Who had this grudge? Well, Carrie Winter and his two cousins, his two siblings. One of the siblings died of a drug overdose, so there were only three left. And these are the ones that had sued Barry and his company Apotex, because they believed they'd been ripped off and robbed of their birthright. Essentially, that was their parents' company, and then Barry got hold of it, and he made it a big company, and then he shafted them. That's their concept of it. It went to court 2 months prior to the murders. They lost. And the judge said, wishful thinking, but it's not yours, and they don't owe you the money. Now, other thing, Carrie Winter. Barry gave him a crap load of money in his life. He had written promissory notes back to Barry for $8 million. Barry was not cheap with Carrie. Barry gave Carrie $8 million over his lifetime, and he wrote these promissory notes, which I'm sure Barry knew he was never going to collect, mind you. So that wasn't the issue. Meanwhile, Carrie had a major issue with drugs, as did his brother, who died, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. He was hooked up with really crappy people. But anyway, both of them were into drugs. He's still alive. He was a cokehead. He was into heroin. He was a crackhead for many, many years, which is one reason, even when he went to work for Barry, he failed, because he was a drug addict. Now, he claims he has been sober for 6 years and works in construction. That's what he claims. He claims he has an alibi the night of the murder, but I am not sure that is verified. Don't know if it's true or not. But I'm just pointing him out because he is, of all the people, the one who is really, really angry. And I have a clip of the Fifth Estate thing below. I also have a clip of just the stuff on Carrie Winter, where he says that he really hates Barry. He almost cries when he talks about it. He says he's just an evil guy, and he's a horrible human being, and he's lots of nasty things to say. And he said that Barry asked him to hire a hitman to kill off Honey. And so they questioned whether that was true or not. So they asked him to do a polygraph, and he failed. So he failed the polygraph on the stuff he said about Barry asking him to kill off kill off Honey. Now, I don't know whether whether they asked during this polygraph, or whether he said, you can't ask me this question. The question I would want to ask is, did you kill Barry and Honey? Were you really home at the time this murder happened? Were you really at a Cocaine Anonymous meeting when this really happened? I would want to ask him the more pertinent questions, but they didn't say whether he refused that or not. I don't know. I can't figure that out from the show. But he did do the thing on that Barry asked him to get a hitman, and it came out as deceptive. So he failed. And he was kind of annoyed about that. But anyway, he failed that. And just to point out, this is him. That's what he looks like. This is him walking. I'm not going to say it looks like this, but could be. But at any rate, now I want to get back to the crime scene and how this would have taken place, because now we got one guy. So you could look at this and say to yourself, well, how is it one guy could accomplish this? How would this be true? Well, clearly one guy did, because only one guy went in and one guy came out. So again, you can say it's hard to do, but somebody done did it, So first of all, Honey comes home. And for a guy who is big enough and strong enough, I'm sure he can handle a 70-year-old woman with a hip replacement. Now, she's overweight, and she's supposedly pretty strong. But hey, come on, let's face it. She is a 70-year-old woman with a hip replacement and arthritis. So I'm going to say a guy can pretty much control her. Now, her phone was found in a bathroom, which she normally wouldn't leave her phone in. So the idea is that she tried to run away from whoever it was. But all you have to do is point a gun and say, do this. And a lot of people will do it because they don't want to get shot, because they're terrified. Now, there was a theory that this could have, that whatever happened on the upper levels, and then the person had to bring the person downstairs. And the claim was, well, who could carry a 170-year-old woman? 170-pound woman. She's 170 years old. That would be light. 170 pounds. That's, a dead woman is hard to carry. And that's probably true, except downstairs is a lot easier than upstairs. So possible. But I'm also, personally, I think that whoever it was, had a gun, whatever knife, whatever he's using, gun would be easier. Tell her to go downstairs, because this is an area that's not normally used. And a person who understands this will say, hey, I want to put them in a location where they're not going to be found immediately. Secondly, there's no sign of breaking and entering. Now, I always point out, with breaking and entering, there's so many ways to get into a house without having to knock on the door and having somebody open it. You could be one of the people coming to look at the house, for example, could open up a window and then come back through that window, because they were putting the house on the market and people were going through the house. They could go into a bathroom and go and come back through that location. Just unlock. Lots of reasons. You can come in behind somebody. You can be waiting for that person to arrive home, and as they open the door, you just go in behind them. So you don't have to know the person for it to be no sign of breaking and entering. However, if it is somebody they can go knock, knock, and then honey opens the door because she knows that person, and then that person comes in and pulls a gun or whatever and says, I got issues, and guides them downstairs, perhaps because they want them to be in a location of the house that they understand exists and therefore isn't going to be well used, and it's a good place to do something. Now, when that person got honey to wherever they decided to do something with her hands were tied behind her back with something. Okay? And there's only one person. So the easiest way to tie people's hands behind their back is have two people, right? One person holds a gun and the other person can just do the tying, right? But you got one person. How do they do that? How do they get the person to cooperate where they got to hold a gun in one hand and tie with the other? Well, I'm going to show you a simple example here. People who are drug addicts, they do that all the time. They know how to tie with one hand and use the other hand for injecting drugs. Just saying. A heroin addict knows how to do that. Not pointing at one particular person, but it is interesting, isn't it? So somebody can do that. They can point a gun, say, put your hands behind your back, and while that person, they can start tying them. They can even have a partial tie or whatever they're going to do and tie their hands, have it ready, and just pull and start and just go around. And that's it can be done very quickly. Now you've got honey under control, let's say down by the pool. All right. As a matter of fact, you might have killed honey by then, because you want to get, you don't want her to get up and run, right? So it's very likely that that's when she was killed. And as the damage to her face could be as the person was strangling her with a belt or whatever he's using, which I guess was a belt. She might have had her face and smashed her face like that a few times, and then he turned around and just hung her up. That's one possibility. Then you get the second person coming home, which is Barry, and Barry comes in and the killer's already in the home, points a gun at him and says, go downstairs to where your wife is. Barry goes downstairs. Lay down. Again, we're talking about a 75-year-old guy who's not in great shape. He's got a gun pointed at him. He sees whether he sees his wife is already dead, or whether, it's possible I don't really, it's hard to say because we don't have the police reports. I don't know what honey was wearing. It's possible she could have had her feet tied. I just don't know. If something was over her pants, she could have still been alive when Barry was brought down. And then Barry's like, oh, guy says, hey, if you don't cooperate, I'll kill honey. And he cooperates. So put your hands behind your back, ties the hands. Now, and then that's it. Now, there's a couple things here I want to point out. One is that the claim is that the coat, let me go to the coat. The coat was used to bind to hold their arms down. Let me tell you, that didn't work at all. I mean, I tried it on a bunch of different coats. Pulling the coat down, even if it was put together. First of all, if you actually have the coat like this, let's see if I can find this. Hold on. I need my mommy to put this together for me. Okay, let's say I've actually got this coat. I'm not going to do the zipper. I'm just going to do this. Well, how are you going to pull the coat? I mean, you got to really work at it. You see what I'm saying? You got to really work at it. And then once you get it down to the point where it's down here, it doesn't hold your arms. Your arms, even if they're behind your back, can still do this. It doesn't make any difference. I will tell you the reason I believe that this was pulled down. What do you notice, guys, is the problem with where the coat is right now? Can anybody say that? Yeah, it's a cheap coat. Believe me, I bought it at what's the cheap place? But it is warm. I'll tell you, it's really, really, really warm inside. Tell me what would you see the problem is when a person has a coat on like this? What's the real problem? I can't do this anymore. Well, that's not right. There it is. Okay, somebody tell me what the problem is. It's cold. It was December. There you go. Thank you very much. Forever Young covers the neck. Rum says covered neck, right? Can't get the belt around the neck. Can't get to the neck. Yes, there you go. Neck not exposed. You all got it. All right. That is exactly right. I think the only reason it was pulled down is because I needed to get to the neck. So I don't understand this is something to keep your arms doing. No, they needed to get to the neck to put the belt around. So one person, my point is that one person did commit this crime because they have pretty much the proof that one guy went into the house and one guy came out of the house. That's what the video tells us. One guy committed the crime. Therefore, you had to have a way to do it. Now, when you are somebody who is actually known to the family, that they might think you lost your mind, that you're playing some game that you're going to be able to get out of. You might not fight as hard because Barry doesn't have any injuries at all. So either the threat was against Honey and therefore he just cooperated without any fighting, and then the belt was put around his neck before he realized what was happening. And by then, with your hands behind your back, there's not much you're doing except dying. Okay, so it's hard to say. Even if he killed Honey earlier, he could have taken that he could have just, I don't know, he could have manipulated Barry in some other way. But the person who did the killing obviously did kill both of them. Okay, and then the question is, and they tied their hands behind their back and then took the ties off. And I wonder why they took the ties off, because a lot of times you just leave them there. Now, you could say it's because they're staging a murder-suicide, or it could be that they didn't want the ties recognized. And I point this out just because, and this is not proof of anything. It's just something, if you were investigating, you would have to consider. If what was used was something like this is a very common tubing used by addicts. If a tubing was used to tie their hands, you kind of don't want to leave that there because it kind of says, guess who did it? Me, the addict. I mean, but I don't know that that's true. We have no proof of what kind of thing it was. So now we wonder, why were they hung the way they were hung on the why were they hung that way? Now, two reasons. You have to look at, when you're looking at motive, and we can't get inside a killer's head, so we have to be kind of careful about this. And this is why you can theorize in order to, like, as a profile, I can theorize and say this is a good lead. I'm not going to say this is true. You can't arrest somebody for this. You can't prosecute them with this kind of information. You have to look for more evidence. Okay? So what I would be telling them right now is that I'd be curious whether the hands were tied with a tubing. I would be looking at saying, if the person wanted to be that close up to them, what was their mindset for doing that? It's a very personal thing. That, again, leads away from a hitman. Very personal. And one of the things that our dear friend, Mr. Winter, said was that Barry would never let you go. He kept you in a stranglehold. I don't think he would use the word stranglehold, but that's essentially what he was saying. That's why he had to sign the promissory notes, because he owned you. He owned you from that moment on. To strangle somebody is very personal. You can look into their eyes and say, now you will pay the price for strangling me. I'm strangling you. I'm taking care of you. That's a very personal thing. Is that what went through the mind of the killer? I cannot say. I'm just saying it's very interesting. And now you have this interesting pose thing. When you pose people, you do it for two reasons. The shock value, yes. Serial killers like to pose people sometimes because it's kind of fun when the police arrive, just have a head on top of the bookcase, not attached to the body, to put a woman in a position where, her legs are apart and she's holding a Bible in her hand or something like that. It makes you laugh to think this is what people are going to see when they arrive at the crime scene. But this is not a serial killer crime. So who else would have that desire to sort of set that whole stage, to set that scenario? Somebody who wants to mock the couple. This is odd that this is the way the couple actually looked. So once they put Honey was hung up, but the focus was on Barry crossing his legs. That was not a natural position. Somebody crossed his legs and put his little glasses on and said, ha, ha, ha. Look at you, nice sitting little couple. It's a very personal crime. Who committed that crime? I can't say it's this guy. I can't. But Kerry Winter says he hated him. He imagined his head rolling down a street. He said, I'm the one that should be the suspect because I hated him. And he said, but I didn't do it. Okay. He said he didn't do it after he said he should be the suspect. But then again, he also said that Barry asked him to get a hit for his wife, and that wasn't true. So obviously he can lie. So if he can lie about one thing, could he lie about he's not the guy? And I don't know what the police have on him. I don't know if he really has an alibi, or the police are just still trying to put together enough pieces to be able to arrest somebody. It's been 4 years. I hope they succeed. But the best suspect, if you're going to look for a best suspect, it is Kerry Winter, because he had motive. He just lost the lawsuit 2 months prior. And you always look at things that happened most recently. 2 months prior, he lost a lawsuit. He owed $8 million in promissory notes. He hated Barry. And there's one guy involved. So, and there's the other things I point out that, could be some indications of how the crime was done, especially when I talk about things like this. When we commit a crime, if we do, we often do things that we do in real life and regular life, not real life, but regular life. In other words, these are things we're comfortable with. We don't do things we're totally uncomfortable with. So, you have to go with who you are. I wouldn't know how to do this kind of crap. I've never done this kind of stuff, but somebody who has could find this very easy to be able to hold a gun on somebody and tie them up at the same time, because they've done that before. So it's always very interesting to look at a person's life and see whether it has something to do with the way they would enact a crime. Again, not saying this is the guy, but I will say this. It's not a murder-suicide, in my opinion. It's not a hit, in my opinion. It's a personal crime. So they're going to be looking very close. Because they're looking for this guy, it's clearly not a hit guy. They're looking for somebody in the family or in the friends who can recognize him. And it all comes down to who had the motive, who had the ability to do it, who had the opportunity to do it. So that's what I'm looking at in this crime. And I don't know if they're ever going to prove it, but maybe they're a little closer than they were before. All right. Now, that's my statement on that today. That's my analysis. Now, let's look back. So I'm going to say, Benny, I'm with you on, as close as I could be on that one. Now, there's a lot of questions you have that I don't know the answers to. Did Kerry Winter know the couple's routine? I haven't a clue. I don't know. He is their relative. He had a lot to do with them. That would be something for the police investigation. Did he hang around them a lot? Did he stalk them? He's I believe he's a single guy. He gets off. It's a construction worker, so he's off early enough to have the whole evening free. Who knows what he did? And let me point this out too. I forgot to mention this. Cousin did stage the scene to look like a murder-suicide. Okay, I'm not going to say that Cousin did that, Red Rum, but I will say this. In his own mind, and whoever is committing this crime may have thought, once they're strangled, wouldn't it be better to make it look like Barry killed Honey? As a matter of fact, that would be a really fun thing to do. Because if I can make it look like Barry killed Honey, one thing is I can make Barry look bad. Secondly, they might buy it, the police. And guess what? They did. And as a matter of fact, I forgot to mention this. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention this. One of the things, the entire family says they were murdered. Guess who doesn't say they were murdered? This guy. Kerry says, no, it wasn't murder. It was murder-suicide. He's the only one who states it's a murder-suicide. Why is that? Is it because he is the killer and he staged it as a murder-suicide? Because he wanted the police to buy it? And for a while they did? I don't know. I can't say he's the killer, and I can't say the killer thought that, but yes, I wanted to bring that up, and I'm glad you did because I forgot to. So yes, it was staged as a murder-suicide. And even though I think when the person took the bindings off the hands, they would think they're not going to catch on to the fact that this is a murder-suicide. But the problem was there was evidence of the bindings having been on the hands. So somebody who's inexperienced at crime may not realize that that evidence is going to continue. And also this whole thing about the coats. If you actually strangled somebody and were then strangling yourself, I don't know what you'd be doing pulling the coats. It's just weird. You just take your coat off, it's just weird. It's a weird way of pulling it down if you're going to do that. So I didn't find that very indicative of suicide as well. But somebody who doesn't know what a murder-suicide looks like will do what they think it looks like. So let's see what else you've got. Comments here. This is actually very true. Typical for a family to reject murder-suicide. That is true. It's also typical for a family to reject suicide. It's also typical for a family to reject accident. For some reason, they always feel guilty when those things happen. So they always want to take suicide or accident and push it over to murder, because then they can feel like I couldn't have stopped it, or my son didn't do something idiotic and kill himself. So it must be murder. So that is very true. They don't usually accept that. But in this particular case, I don't think they accept it because there's a good reason not to accept it. Carrie, on the other hand, wants to go there. So, well, Julie says, being strangled, they would struggle and get marks where the bindings were. Yes, that's why there are marks on there, because they died with their hands behind their back, trying to get away from what they were doing and couldn't hardly move. It's one of the reasons there's not a lot of damage. I really think that it's possible that Honey's damage came from smashing her face onto the floor while she's being strangled. But it doesn't necessarily be. You could always arch your back up and your head never hits anything, which could be true for Barry. It's also possible that Barry could have been flipped over and strangled from the front as well, and so that whoever it was killing him could look him straight in the face and get his kicks out of that. I wouldn't be surprised that that's true, because he's a 75-year-old man. If you flip him over, his hands are behind his back. There's not a lot he can do. He can kick his legs around, but he can't stop the strangulation. So I wouldn't be surprised at that. And then he was flipped over and was looking at the killer. That I would think is true. Carrie says, yeah, he is a good suspect. And he is a good suspect. Now, most of the time you say person of interest when it's very vague, but he has admitted to wanting to kill Barry and hating him and having motive. So he gets to be a suspect. He gets to be a suspect unless there is a solid alibi for him, and it has to be a very solid alibi, not just in some place and nobody knows how long he was there, whether he was really there. I don't know his alibi. I haven't seen anything that has excluded him as a suspect. And if it isn't him, it's somebody just like him. But I don't know who else just like him had that much of an issue with Barry. So let's see. Go backward. I'm going to go backwards now. What? No, that's not true. Well, okay. He was not. First of all, he was not doing drugs at the time. He's supposedly clean for 6 years. So I'm not talking about his, that he was so messed up he was on drugs at the time he was doing it. He didn't, as far as the coat goes, he wasn't the person killing they weren't thinking about the coat. They were just pulling the coat down to get to the neck. That's nothing fancy. Tying somebody's hands behind their back is nothing fancy. I don't see, but the concept of what the coat means and what the bindings mean, yes, he's not going to do that. It's not, and most people, even if he's done drugs in his life, most people just aren't going to think of that. If they're regular, normal people, if you're a hit person, you might, or you're some kind of fancy assassin, you might figure that crap out. But most people, they're not going to think about that stuff. They're just going to say, "Oh, I tied up their hands. I'm going to take this with me so I don't leave evidence." That's what they're going to think. So yeah. Yes, he did fail a polygraph. That was on the show. He failed a polygraph, but on the show about Barry asking for his wife to be killed and for Kerry to get him a hitman on the show. But I don't know if they asked him if he killed the Shermans, and I don't know if the police did any polygraph with him or not. I don't know. I don't have that information. Let me go backwards a little bit here. Actually, I don't know that there was talk. Actually, what I heard, Steve, was that what I read and heard, I can't remember where it came from of my sources, that actually he wasn't leaving money to charity. And it was kind of a weird thing that a guy who given so much money to charity wouldn't have that in his will, but apparently he did not. So the kids basically got a lot of money. And would the kids kill him for the money? And there's some theory that one of his kids might be willing to kill him for the money. And they could. So I'm sure they did look at the children to see if any of them could be involved in this. I would think to have that up close a crime, they supposedly had a pretty good relationship with the kids, although one was a little bit on the outs. But to go in there and kill your mother and father by strangling in a cold-blooded way, not in a rage, like, a teenager that does a family annihilation kind of stuff, it doesn't seem overly likely. It's not like they didn't have money. They were doing quite well, and the father was quite generous regardless of anything. But I'm sure, yes, they had to look at the family, and that's one group they'll look at, along with Kerry, and along with Kerry's the other two that lost the lawsuit. So there's a number of people to look at. So Kerry's not the only one. I just say this is a very personal crime, and I don't see anything out there that would have. I don't see anybody else that had such an issue that they would come in and murder the two of them, except somebody very close, family, relatives. So let's see what else we got here. Let me see what I've got. Let's see here. This is Anna says, could there have been a fear motive? Were there threats of reporting crime activity, relative using drugs, victim had pharmaceutical business, lots of possibilities? Well, there was a burglary once, but this is not a burglary. Nobody stole anything. at all. I mean, you're going to kill people. If you want to steal stuff, you steal stuff, but none of that. It wasn't a home invasion. There was no evidence of it being a home invasion. Also, what's interesting is they didn't have any drugs in their system either. So one of the comments somebody had made, which I thought was relatively reasonable, that if Barry wanted to kill his wife, he could have used drugs because gosh knows he had access to tons of them, or if he wanted to kill both of them, he could kill, just, hey, hon, let's sit down and have a nice drink. And then you both keel over. It's an easier way to do it. So to go through all that, the only way I believe that Barry would have killed his wife and why he would have done it by strangling was that he got angry. He got really, really angry. But then usually what you see is marks on the person's neck, because usually when you get angry, you're going after them like this. You're not putting a belt around their neck or a rope around their neck or a scarf around their neck. You're going for them with your hands, and there's no sign of that. As far as I know, there's no sign of fingerprints. So again, it doesn't look like a rage crime by Barry. Then he went, oh crap, I killed my wife. I guess I might as well off myself because I don't want to go to prison, So again, the murder-suicide thing, we can just throw that out. And the bindings on the hands, eliminate it entirely. So just absolutely no. And the hit thing, it's just not the way hit people commit crimes. So we're down to personal. We're down to totally personal. Okay, Kay says, okay, let's see. Instead of someone wanting to hurt Barry or Honey directly, maybe they wanted to hurt someone who loved them. That's a long way around. Yeah, I mean, and it's this is not an easy crime. You know what I mean? To plan this, to take this through, doing one and then, being there for one and then waiting for the other to arrive home, and then doing a personal up close. It's just too, no. Whatever happened between the person who killed him and the people he killed. That's what it comes down to. And I will say he, because it's not a she. So I'm sorry, it's not. It's a guy. So it's it's somebody personal close to the family who is likely he. Now, could I be wrong? Yes, I want to point this out just because in case I am, I'm going to look like an idiot. But no, the more important thing is that understand profiling. I point this out all the time. Whether a profiler like myself, a criminal profiler, or a detective who is profiling his own crime, profiles it and analyzes the crime scene evidence and the motives and the possible suspect. It's to give you a lead, and you take that lead and you pursue that lead, and you find if that lead brings you to more evidence that allows you to arrest and convict. And sometimes because you have certain evidence that maybe you don't have enough of, you could end up analyzing incorrectly. And sometimes you could just screw up and analyze incorrectly, which is why in the long run, you want to have the solid amount of evidence to then say, we've got probable cause, and I'm not just arresting you because I made up a good theory. That's not acceptable. My theory is this is a personal crime. My top suspect is Kerry Winter. Doesn't mean I'm right, it's a personal crime. It doesn't mean it is Kerry Winter. It's just my analysis that he's the top suspect in a crime that's very personal. And if it turns out that somebody else, but it has a very much a similar thing, and he's just a goofball who can't shut up, well, that's the way it'll be. If it turns out to be a hit, I'd be real surprised. I mean, then I would go, wow, I got to relook at everything then, because I saw nothing in this that was a hit. And I would want to then re-educate myself, to restudy everything, to determine why I was wrong, where I went wrong in my analysis, so that I could analyze better in the future, because we all have room for improvement. We all have things to learn so we can be better at our jobs. We're not in one static, place and can't get better or, improve our skills. So, let's see if I'm going backwards a little bit again. Let me go back down to the bottom here. See if anybody new came in and said anything. Oh my goodness. Yes, this is true. Molly says there are apparently no footprints outside in the snow. No. They had heated sites. They had heated driveways. You know, it's really good for your daily routine. You don't have to slip on ice, which is much more dangerous, generally speaking, to people who are getting older. That you're going to slip and hurt yourself, fall and break your back, break your leg, break your hand. In this case, it allowed the killer to come and go without leaving footprints. So sometimes it works against you. You never know. Yeah, this is a very good point, Lisa. Is Kerry Winter too obvious? Don't you think? Yes, he is too obvious in a way. Yeah, because everything points to him. It does feel that way. And I thought that myself. I'm like, okay, I know I've narrowed it down to a personal crime, and I'm having a real hard time getting away from Kerry Winter. It's like he's just standing out there going, it's me. Yeah, there are people who love to confess to crimes. There are people who like to make you think they committed a crime, because they get some kind of cheap thrill out of that, because they figure, well, I'm not the guy. They're never going to actually arrest me. But I'm going to make everybody think I did it because it's kind of fun. But I'm going to say I didn't do it. He could be playing with us. This is very true. I would say one of the things he said, I thought, let me see if I can find it, because this is really good. One of the things he said about Barry was, where is it? Oh, it's a really good thing. Okay. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Where is it? Oh, man. Okay. I know where it is. I took a picture of it. Okay, let me find my picture, because I thought this was really interesting. Hold on. Of course, I can't find it. Okay, but what he said was that he thought Barry might be a psychopath, that he was cold-blooded, that he had no friends, which is interesting to me, because who's the one that's probably more likely to be a psychopath, cold-blooded, and has no friends? Whoops, wrong. Oh, both ways. Sometimes when you describe other people, you really describe yourself. You cast that onto another person. So I find it interesting that that's what he considers Barry, and yet he exhibits much more of the behaviors of a psychopath than Barry does. So is he a psychopath? I can't say. I'm not a psychologist. I haven't had him on the couch, but the fact that he lies about things, the fact that he's had problems with drugs, the fact that he's borrowed a ton of money and still hates the guy who gave it to him, he's got all kinds of issues. Could he be a psychopath? He well could be. Maybe he's describing himself and not Barry. I don't know. But it's very interesting when you do that, when you describe somebody else to that degree. Barry had an interesting personality, there's no question about it. But he was very philanthropic. He really liked to help people. I mean, that's not a sign of a psychopath. It can be someone who likes to get power by giving money, but there was a lot of evidence that wasn't entirely his thing. So he might have been, have a big ego, but I didn't see that he was a psychopath. So, but him, maybe. Don't know. Let's see what else you got to say here. Martin says, I agree with Benny Thompson's opening gambit. Yeah, I do too. I mean, that's where I'd go. I say it's hard to get away from Kerry, although it's not. Then again, Kerry was lending money. Why kill the golden goose? Oh, no. He had already gotten $8 million off of Barry. And yes, you could think if he killed Barry, he couldn't get more money. But at that point, when he lost the lawsuit, I don't know that Barry was going to give him any more money. He just wanted his money back, the $8 million he owed him. So I don't think he killed the golden goose at that point. I think that goose was done cooked already. So okay. Yes, sometimes it is a tax write-off, but that is not what I see when I've looked at all the evidence of the people they gave money to and the businesses he put in. to, and many, many people that he helped. So yes, it's true that sometimes it is a tax write-off, but they did a lot of other stuff which was unusual, shall we say, for somebody just wanted to get tax write-off. Oh, thank you very much, and I appreciate that so much. Wow. You don't know how much I appreciate it. Let's keep this channel going through all the demonetization. So I appreciate it. Thank you. That is awesome. You're great. Let me see if there's anybody else who has any commentary here before I go and have a little dinner. Let me see if there's any. This is true. This is, by the way, that's a good point, Steve. Barry's business partner, Frank D'Angelo, owed him money. That's true. But he's a businessman. Is he really going to come in there and hang them? Again, owing somebody money and been a business partner and friends for years, it's a very strange way to kill somebody unless you're really, really, really angry. Otherwise, you find a simpler way to do it. You just do. On backwards? I have not heard they were on backwards. I just heard they were pulled down over their arms. I did not hear about anything backwards. I haven't heard that. I don't know where that comes from. It is, again, I was to point out, outside the police investigation, we can only go with what information that we're pretty sure is true. And we have to be very careful about, there's so much out on the internet where people are saying this is true and this is not true. And sometimes what happens is you start believing it, even on the regular media, because what they'll do is, let's say the regular media says one outfit, whoever it is, says that those coats were used like a straitjacket. Next day, there's 150 media outlets who say those coats were used like a straitjacket, like quotes around it, like exactly the same. They don't say where they got the information from. They pretend they got it, but it just spreads like wildfire through the entire media. And then when you're reading the media reports, you're going through on Google, you're like, straitjacket, 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 straitjacket. And after you've seen it 150 times, you think, oh, this must be true. It must have come from a police report. No, it's just a bad game the media plays because they don't do their own investigating anymore. They just steal from the next person. So it used to be that you didn't write what you didn't investigate. Now it's just, you just go and you just literally steal it from some other media outlet, and then you post it as your own. So be very careful of that. And I can't say it's not true. I just can't say it is true. And I don't see how that would even make sense, to tell you the truth. Okay, so if you have your hands behind your back, you would have to have them take the coats off, put their arms through the coats first, then put their hands behind their back, and then do it. That still doesn't work for me. It's not the same thing as a straitjacket. I might even prove that here. No, it's not. It doesn't make any sense. It's just your arms still go like this. So it doesn't matter whether it's on backwards or forwards. Your arms still go like this. It's not that tight. That's why I believe it was simply they pulled it down to do something very basic, which is be able to reach the neck. That's a simple, practical move, shall we say? Practical. So let's see what else you got to say here. Colleen, I wish I could answer that. Can you settle a will if there's an open murder case? I don't see why you couldn't, because it's still, they're dead. I mean, I don't know that you have to prove who done did it. Who knows? I'm not Canadian, so who knows? Monkey. What is this here? Monarch. I like the way you put the pictures behind you, but you got that creepy guy looking over your shoulder. I don't trust him. Yeah, it might get me. Gretchen says polygraphs are not admissible as evidence, so probably why he didn't seem upset. Well, he's also, if he is a psychopath, if he is one, psychopaths tend to, like, as soon as they're found lying, they just change the subject. That's very normal. Again, if I were doing a polygraph and I knew I was telling the truth, and it came up, they said I was deceptive, I would be very upset. If I were lying and I came up deceptive, I'd be very upset. But if I'm a psychopath, and they do that, they switch, they're just like that. You can say to a psychopath, for example, a psychopath will say, I'm late to work because there was a car crash down the street and I couldn't get by. And you say to him, well, no, I just came down that street and there is no car crash. And he'll say, I'm going to go get some food now. Just walk away.